Hello, Dane. Now comes an important conversation and exploration about women, romantic relationships, and sexuality. Now, we started writing books in our 30s to make sense of some of this craziness, and I think it's generally a good idea. So what I'm going to recap is my best sense of a guide for you based on what I know about you and what I've experienced in the world. I'll start with some bad news. It does not get easier with time to find an amazing partner. It gets harder so far, meaning I would say that it was the peak was kind of taking some of the initial workshops on relationships and sexuality in our late 20s, early 30s. That saw a rapid growth process, protocol. Then as we tried to keep iterating upwards, the number of people interested, available, capable of doing that dropped off. And I would also say that, as people get more addicted to their phone and the dopamine and adrenaline that comes with virtual reality, quality human relationships become more difficult because people are more of an addict. And I would also say that it becomes harder to compete. Like an addict will always choose their drugs over anything else, including their own presence. And so in my period, phones are the main drug, and people will cut off the people and presence of the moment in order to honor the drug. So I would say that, wherever you are in the timescape, connecting with the best people you're able to connect with at that time is, so far as I know, as good as it gets. Now, I want to kind of give voice to some patterns that at a younger age were uncertain, hesitant, but that seem a little bit clearer to me now. And it has to do with demographics. The first thing that I would say is that 30% of women are in their own projections about men to such an extent that they cannot actually see the person in front of them. And so you're going to find that type of thing going on, and it's going to be confusing to you because, these women will say things like, well, men like this. You're going to say, well, I would really like this. And a woman is going to argue with you and say, no, men, i.e. her projection, like this, right? So what do you do when you're standing right in front of the person and are invisible? Well, it's not an entirely new experience. It is a painful one, right? Sherilyn, mom, incapable, one of those women, incapable of seeing either herself or another human being, and lost, interested in fantasies and ideas about human beings, not in actually seeing, connecting, and being seen. So if you understand that that's 30% of women, number one, I have not been able to crack it. Now, it might be doable, meaning I think that in a retreat setting, in meditation, with open-ended periods of time, you might be able to shatter the glass, and with the glass, shatter the projection, and actually see someone. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing, because now you have a traumatized person, right? People are traumatized when their idea of who they are, which is in a relationship with their idea of who the world is broken or vulnerable, right? And so breaking through someone's projection tends to startle them. Where am I? What's going on? I don't know, right? So, you must then take care of someone in a state of shock that the world is not the way that they imagined it. And in a chauvinistic culture where women are ashamed of needing, if they need you to take care of them, they're very likely to now be upset about that, right? And so it's not a good trajectory. So my sense is just know that 30% of the population is off in their own world in such a deep way that they neither can get out, they don't want to get out, and that nothing you do to kind of take them out of their illusion is going to be helpful. Now, we've tried lots of different things because that is one of our wounds, to be invisible, to be, unseen. And so we've tried lots of different things. You may or may not have written this book yet, but this was kind of my final kind of backlash towards this constant commitment to invisibility and projection. So this is a book that I wrote about, maybe let's say age 35, 36, somewhere around there. It's called Intimacy, Co-Creating a High Relationship with Me. And this came out of a variety of people because we did get into a series of conversations and small relationships with people lost in their own world. And then we would end the relationship and they would always say something like, oh, if only I had known that this about you or that about you, then their suggestion is that it's your fault that I didn't know these things. And so, this was frustrating because they didn't ask the questions that would allow them to know. And they often diverted the conversation away from deeper areas. And then they often squished the relationship into such a tiny little pocket of time that even if you wanted to, you couldn't tell them a tenth of what you wanted them to know, right? And so this is a maddening thing. So partly as an exercise of frustration, partly as a bit of a test, partly as maybe these people actually want to know, we wrote this book. And in this book, we go over every single thing chapter by chapter that people pretend that they do want to know, but it turns out they don't actually want to know. And this is bizarre, but it's not your bizarreness. And so, what I can say is that having written this book, so that all the women that desperately want a man that talks, that desperately want a man that communicates, that desperately want a man that's in touch with his feelings, that desperately want a man who's willing to grow, that desperately want to know and have this amazing relationship, so that all of those women who are talking about all of those things could actually read these books, learn, grow, communicate, be with a man that communicates, etc., and have exactly what they complain that they want but don't have? Well, it's very interesting. I would say that 40% of people, the worst thing that you can do is interrupt a woman complaining about there being no good men, and actually say, hello. You want a person that communicates? Hello. You want someone with more quality time? They will be furious, right? And so I would say that the most important thing to understand is that 40% of the population does not want a relationship, either anything like they are complaining that they don't have, or with you or a real person. Now what that means, and what I hope to be giving you, is that you then need to look for 60% of the population that does want something. Now there is another 30% of the population that is kind of intuitive, kinetic, physical, relatively unconscious, that does want to connect, but that algorithm is interested in vitality, in humor, in charisma, in dominance, in money, in pleasure, in sex. And you've never enjoyed being in that kind of unconscious kinetic role, right? And so that takes another 30% of the population out. That some of them like you, right? There's about 15% of those that really like you, in various ways, sexually or otherwise. But they're really not interested in growing, talking, communicating, etc., and quickly get overwhelmed with that, right? So that effectively leaves then that 30% out. And then there is another kind of 25% that is a bit confused, that's kind of moving through life, that's somewhat interested, somewhat frightened, that can be cautiously led into some form of relationship if you create a safe space for them. But they do not have the time, the vision, the discipline to meet you and take things forward, right? They will very happily meet you every Thursday afternoon for a little conversation about this and a hesitant exploration of that, right? There's another 25%, or there's also, just people out doing their own thing that have, no interest in relating at all. Then there's about maybe 5% of people that really do want, or kind of want what you want, but they don't know if it's possible. They've never done it before. It's very difficult. It's a new experience. It's kind of like learning to tightrope, and and that is a group that has been probably the main group that we've connected with. So that 5% that wants it but hasn't organized their life to create large amounts of quality time, exploration of ideas, going out, doing personal growth seminars. Women have generally had to be dragged to therapy, proactive or reactive therapy. There's a lot of people basically just figuring out their lives, and enough overwhelm around that to not want something really new and tremendous, a great opportunity. So what's left is 5% of people who are competent enough, who can see you, who enjoy you, and who might or might not want some kind of relationship. Now, of those 5%, the biggest dividing thing is twofold. First of all, they're not as interested in relating as you are, right? So most of the people who have woken up enough and gotten their lives together enough to be capable and somewhat interested in that kind of relationship tend to be people in their 50s, if it's in the US, and they've kind of gotten other parts of their life they now enjoy, right? But for you, there's always been a certain amount of desperation due to insecure attachment trauma. Now, this would have been very nice if anyone had explained to you, but they didn't. So let me do that. When you are forming your first bonding with, typically parents, you form a template, and your parents were close or violently dissociative, right? So you never got to experience the middle ground with that template, right? Dad was violent and emotionally completely unavailable. Sherilyn was smothering, a little bit incestuously so, and also then dissociative and scared. And so there really is, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the body when it comes to trying to connect in that mid-ground and find a regulated space between people, right? That template isn't there. And so you either need something that's very tight and close or very distant so that you can do your own thing. And what most people want to do is they want to meet in the middle where you don't have a template, right? And so this has been the curse of our relationship life. Because your default is to be closer than 99% of the population in that demographic of wanting to grow and having it somewhat together and valuing relationship and enjoying spiritual, some sense of meditation. In that demographic, the too tight, they tend to have a Sunday group they're already going to, or this or that. And so the relationship is not the main thing, which for you it is. For you, when you are in a relationship, it is the main thing. And so it is always lonely when you have a disparity of priority, right? If you love going to this movie and this is the best thing that you can imagine, and you look over and the other person, whatever, it's lonely. It's frustrating. Like, what do you mean, whatever? Right? Yeah, well, what isn't? I don't want to even talk about it, right? That's lonely, right? There's a disconnect. But so it's better to be alone, right? And go to that movie and really enjoy it, right? But if you can be with someone who enjoys the movie as much as you do, that's fantastic. So we're in that territory with relationships where if it's a good relationship, we're really into it. And we're into the growth and the stability and what I would call a house building paradigm, like putting in the infrastructure to support the relationship. And that is simply something that is vacant. It's not part of the cultural architecture, particularly that, so far we've never been interested in having children. In part out of empathy for the child, right? We know how difficult it's been to be a sensitive in this culture. And we know the divorce statistics, but more importantly, we know how sociopathic human beings are in all kinds of areas. And we know how cruel it is to an infant to be an addict. And most people are addicts. And there hasn't been a relationship. I'm in my longest relationship right now, with, of 5 years. It's not stable, safe, and kind enough that I would want to bring an infant into that. And so, that's, there is a kind of group of people that, want father material and that would probably build a life around that. But I've always wanted to see if the skills were there to justify being a parent. Like, can you see someone? Because if they can't see me, they can't see their own child either. And it's very, very lonely being raised by a projection who has a projection about you and who doesn't want you to get near and shatter the glass. It's a very lonely reality that we've lived and do not want to give to a child. Now, that is just difficult territory. And I would suggest in that area talking about it, measuring it, understanding that this is a pain, it is a frustration, it is an anxiety that, it's been with me for decades. And so I can now hold it and be present to the other person, right? It is very important to be with someone that actually wants to negotiate and build and navigate a relationship in a container together. Right? You need that. I need that. Now, I would also say that do another wave of inner child work. You did a terrific wave in, teenage years. There's a whole nother wave beneath that of deep grief and trauma of our infancy, of being hit, being frightened, being terrified, being in the unknown, being overwhelmed, and being abandoned in that place. Like the protocol, go cry yourself until you're quiet, and I'm not going to connect with you until you've cried yourself into exhaustion. That is a very lonely and a very brutal protocol. And it is the protocol of many parents. It was the protocol of your parents. It's a very, very lonely place in that place in your body. And trying to form a deep romantic connection takes you into that place in your body with, unfortunately, mostly Western people who have no clue how to take care of that. Now, in that space, right, I explored time in Thailand and in the Philippines, briefly in Bali, but here's what I ran into. In Thailand, almost nobody speaks English, and there is a fair amount of brutality towards the sensitive feminine side in men and in women. But there's a magnificent honoring of feeling. It's paradoxical. There's a tremendous gift in Thailand just culturally. I would say culturally more than romantically, though. I would say on balance, all the kind of lover experiences in Thailand have been generally valuable. And certainly, sexuality is always pleasurable, but also traumatic. And I would say that as the growth curve tapered off, and as no woman has shown up and really connected with you, this is a painful, maddening experience. And to date, no woman has shown up in anything like the archetypal ideal. Like you've wanted all your life to have someone say, oh, I get you. I want to take the time to learn about you. I like this and not like this. Let's form a framework and let's build a container together and let's prioritize it. That's all you've wanted. And it is incredibly frustrating, painful, maddening that has never happened. Now, I'm learning a little bit now, and so I'm expecting that this may shift over the next 20 years. What I'm learning now is that deep in a biological level, we have a deep shame, inadequacy, body memory that comes from the terror of being hit by Michael and the terror of contempt and dissociation and humiliation by Sherilyn. Right? We took to, of course, calling them by first names because they didn't really behave as parents or adults. They're just, traumatized teenagers having kids and dumping the next generation of issues onto us, right? That combined with sensitivity, the fear and the shame combine so that we're controlling a lot of our energy. So at least 20% of our outwardness and fun, etc., is bound up in that body memory. And that has a belief internalized by a child. I'm unlovable, I'm undesirable, I'm unwanted, etc. And that's in the body. And I have not learned how to move through the body fully in that territory. After a good 1,000 hours of work in that, let's say that I've made 5 or 10% progress. That's not very hopeful, but it is the state of psychological technology today, right? That is above average in our cult today. That's not about you, Dane. And I'm very, very sorry that you have and have had to deal with this. I'm incredibly sorry. It hurts, it's painful, it's tiring to carry that pain. It's not clear what to do with it, other than to just dissociate from human beings. And there's good medicine in that, by the way. I want you to know that you are correct that a really great relationship is the pinnacle of it all. It's definitely worth it. And we have had months of that in our life, and we know what that's like. We know what it takes on the part of a woman. We know what it takes on our part. We've co-created that with several different people for a period of time. That does not seem to be what women are most interested in most of the time. So, what's the most valuable thing to you is not, we have yet to meet the woman for whom that is the most valuable thing, and they're willing to build it. I mean, everyone's waiting to be given it, including us. Like, wouldn't it be nice if someone just gave that to us? But waiting to build it. But what I want you to know, Dane, is that your quality time with yourself is in the top 30% of human interactions, right? So if you're gambling, which we've done a lot of, like let's try and just connect with people and see if it's better than being alone. If you're gambling, 70% of the time, the interactions you have with other people, they're going to take time and energy to initiate. And unfortunately, it's left still within the male chauvinism for the male to do most of the initiating. So we've done 95% of all social initiation in our life. It's tiring, right? So it takes energy to initiate. It takes time to initiate. 90% of the people you connect with will not have the empathic and communication skill to make to make that initiation a good opportunity. So there's going to be some teaching, and most people do not want to learn how to maximize value in an interaction the way you do. You give them a book, they don't want to read it. You ask them questions, they say, great question, then they say they have to go. And they don't take the effort to loop back. Right? That's a remarkable thing. 90% of the people you will interact with, regardless of how much they enjoy the interaction, will take no concrete action to repeat, which means that in a chaotic, very highly populated world, you never see each other again, right? And so that is a flaw, right? It's a stunning flaw. You meet someone, they'll say, this is the best conversation in their life. And then they say, bye. It's like, well, if it wasn't my best conversation, but if it was, I would have said, hey, could I get your number and let's have another conversation, right? So that little piece is not built into the culture. So there's been a fair amount of dissipation of energy doing the initiation, and then it drifts away. And 70% of those interactions have been so suboptimal as to be disappointing. And then there's no clear answer about what to do about it. And what to do about it? Well, I'd like to give you some possibilities. I'm working to build a community. So that's one thing to do about it. Investing in money to be able to visit communities, that's another thing to do about it. Traveling, spend more time in Denmark, spend more time in Philippines, spend more time in Thailand. That's good. You know, I'm building the community in Costa Rica because of good visa immigration, but also because of beautiful land law, variety of things. So I'm basically purchasing land in Costa Rica and importing the world into that place to create a microculture. Get a dog. The sooner the better. It will improve your life 30% because a dog is more intelligent empathically at bonding than 90% of the humans that you and I have met. So a dog is better than our culture at secure connection. Get a dog. Get 2 dogs. Right? So that will take off 30% of the load of frustration, because much of our life we've been looking at like, no one, not a single fucking person on the whole planet wants a really tight, secure connection like this. Of all the people complaining, no. Now, this is quite laughable, right? And you have been very diligent at a systemic level at doing this. Like I remember there was a woman named Leslie. She's thoughtful. She's over 50 years old, so moderately self-aware. She's sick in bed, so she has tons of time. She's not working. She has disabilities. So you would think that finally, you're one of the things that we run into tremendously is, oh, I just don't have time. I just don't have time. I just don't have time, which is, of course, bullshit. Everyone has time. They're just doing stuff about. So that's an irritant. But obviously, Leslie's going to have time. No. She would rather lay in bed sick or healthy or sit in the house than initiate a rich relationship. And, you know, and so when it gets to be that absurd that we're this dissociative of a culture, that people literally would rather sit feeling lonely in bed or watch TV than make an effort to connect, right? That's pretty dark, right? That's pretty dark. And that's a pain, that's a wound, right? So pushing more energy into that wound does not work. And overall, that's my assessment. We've hosted groups. It will take a lot of energy to put the group out there and bring people together and organize, and then a lot of energy to hold all people's stuff. And then they go away, right? In the San Francisco Bay Area, the support for the group leader is not usually as much as it takes, right? So I've talked with other group leaders, So I would say hosting groups, iffy. Reaching out, iffy, like 70% of the time, more energy is going out than coming in. That's painful. So here's my advice to you, Dane. Number one, save and invest money. Number two, get 2 dogs. Number 3, use the cushion of that money to travel and do long stay travel of like 3 months, right? And look, I would say number 4, start a vlog, right? There are people that do connect with this. It's just inefficient to find them in a crowd, right? It's inefficient. But start a vlog and start your voice and protect your resonance, your energy, right? So I collapsed into bitterness, into irritation, and into rage with that loop, right? So that means I made a mistake. So we're trying to correct that for you. The dogs are so important because they have always fed us we get 3 times more energy from a dog than we give, as opposed to in most outreaches, giving 3 times more energy than we receive, right? So dogs, net positive, 70% of humans, net negative. You're not going to change the humans, right? You're not going to change that 70% demographic, but you can first of all understand that just spending time, like this is spending time with you here. This is more satisfying than 70% of the human population, particularly in Western culture. Now that's another thing. Visit Africa, the continent, visit people where people are awake and alive, right? The quote, poorer a culture is, the more they are there. It's a stunning correlation, but it is true. All you have there is a stick, no phone, there's a stick, there's a rag. You can connect, right? And it's that connection that you value, that you want. It has nothing to do with education, nothing to do with money, it has to do with presence and connection. So I would say the poorer and the more rural the place that you can go there. And that's why I'm saying start with a bit of a nest egg and stuff so that you can afford to pay the mortgage and stuff as, all your expenses continue while you're traveling. Do art. So things we can do together, do art, write books, play with dogs, go for walks, listen to podcasts, listen to vlogs, enjoy beautiful cooking, going out and just enjoying the public ambiance. Like there's a lovely bakery I go to for brunch, Creekside Bakery. It's just such a nice ambiance. Get fresh flowers 3 or 4 times a week and enjoy the beauty of those flowers, right? Enjoy the sensuality of good, healthy organic food. And yes, it could be 3 times better, right? But so far, that stability of amazing interaction it's very unstable, and it's statistically unlikely, right? So the way to, I think, work with that is do another round of inner child work. And what we're still working on right now is getting to that core body level where that deep shame is, because there is another group of people that are radiant, that want to connect, and that I'm ashamed to be seen by. I don't feel worthy of them, right? And so I turn away, or I don't light up because I'm afraid of rejection, right? And so that's a deep body memory, which, we've done the 1,000 hours of traumatic literacy. That doesn't shift the body. It's doing somatic work, right? So we're working with that. And that could be the pivot. So if you delete everything else that I've said and just say that there's a deep shame in the body, and that there's 1% or 1% of 1% of the population that loves you and sees you and loves themselves and sees themselves and would like to connect with you, and that you don't feel worthy of that. You don't feel lovable by that. And so there's a breath holding rather than an opening up to. I'm not receiving them, right? Maniko, you may or may not have started doing some work with her. She's kind of in that category of aliveness. And so, that's, and what I would say is that you are correct. You have a terrific ability to critic, to be a critic. You can see what's going on, the blind spots, the hypocrisies, and all of that. Well done. But you don't see the shame and the body language that communicates your belief in unworthiness to other people parallel with the words. You don't see that. And it's not true, right? You're valuable, but that's mental knowing. The body doesn't know it, right? And so the body is ashamed. If you can work with that, then energy will start coming to you. Right now, you can't really let it in. And so I would say that that's really the key takeaway. And you look back at younger age and say, well, I did all that inner child work, and I listened to the shame tapes, and I've done all that, yeah. But it didn't take you into the core. That's in your body. I would work with microdosing mushrooms and really being present to that shame, 1. 2, I would know that it's at a whole nother level, that working with channeled entities isn't going to help you that much with it. It's in the body. And it is frustrating that there aren't better practitioners, right? We haven't come across a practitioner that can say, hey, you're doing this and this, and you need to do this. Right? It's that, but that may also be in that category. There may be better practitioners that we're ashamed to be seen by. Right? And so that's right. So I would say that it's in that territory that you can have the greatest healing and the greatest shift. And meanwhile, right, invest, dogs, travel, and enjoy your own company, and do that deep healing shame work.